He's on 5 hours and 15 minutes of waiting for this presentation, so appreciative of him sticking around again. Kurt, if you just describe like the range of things you do for our board members.
Sure. Community services, gosh, encompasses a number of different projects. In our pupil services area, basically services for students and families. In our school district, we've divided it between Ms. Zabrowski, Ami Zabrowski, and myself. Ami really oversees all of the student services right within schools, so special education, school social workers, counselors, school psychologists. Community services encompasses really all of our pupil services that we're either partnering with organizations to bring right within schools or we're providing out in the community. So we're involved in supporting students experiencing homelessness, all of our community mental health partnerships, help support our SROs, oversee our own alternative education program in-house. We oversee services at our La Crosse County Jail in the juvenile detention facility. A lot of our community impact projects, all of community schools falls under community services. So that's absenteeism is one of the things that falls in, largely because absenteeism is not a school issue, it's actually a community issue. And so we're required by statute minimally once every 4 years to bring our whole county together. So a lot of the work that you'll hear about tonight is work that our area school districts have been part of, our local systems of support, parents, other stakeholders. So it's a little bit about community services. So we'll jump in. Absenteeism is probably one of the most prevailing impacts from the pandemic that will probably take years to resolve and work at. Earlier in the board meeting, lots of things were referenced. We know learning was lost. Some of the speakers that spoke to our increase in the AODA issues, they're spot on. We've shared that as part of our code as well. Student mental health has, of course, been a concern, but attendance has been a pretty big shift, really, since the pandemic, and something that school districts across our nation are really struggling with. One of the ways that we frame this is really students can only benefit from the instruction, supports, and interventions that they receive. So when you think about, we come up here and presented to all the neat things we're doing around student mental health and work that we have within our building. Kids really only benefit from that if they're at school, which is why attendance is just so critical. Early in the pandemic, we knew that absenteeism was set to double, which it did in our district. This is a quote out of Ed Week survey back in October of 2020. We were preparing for this. Like I said earlier, county seat school districts are required to bring their county partners together once every 4 years. We've been meeting every year. Sometimes multiple times a year with our county partners to address it. This has been a very dynamic issue for our community, and despite some of the challenges we have a very active group trying to figure out how to make sure kids are at school ready to learn. Like I shared, chronic absenteeism is not just a local issue, it's a national issue. So when you really talk with school districts across our country, every school district's struggling with it, and it impacts all demographics. So this is a graph that looks at economic status. We can see that economically advantaged have the same struggles. EL status doesn't matter. Gifted and talented status, same thing, seen even for students in those programs. Chronic absenteeism being a major issue. In fact, locally, I've talked with some institutions of higher education. They've shared for the first time ever, they've begun implementing attendance policies even for their graduate programs because attendance has been just a new issue that lots of folks are dealing with. This is a slide that we share with all of our community partners. Lots of risk factors for absenteeism, and hopefully you have a PDF of this. It'd be impossible to see this on the screen, but there's family factors around supervision, alcohol and drug use. There's school factors, school size, attitudes of students, attitudes of staff, flexibility to meet needs. There's certainly economic factors. In the midst of COVID, we did know that there were some students, there was like a national discussion, and it was definitely happening locally, but kids who left school to enter the workforce and ended up being a prime opportunity to be able to provide for their family or help support their family. There's student factors, and then there's just other factors, things that happen within our community conditions that have an impact on attitudes towards school, habits in the neighborhood, getting kids to school. And one of the things that we share is all these risk factors were things we were studying before the pandemic. And COVID really represented a time where a lot of kids just really didn't have a lot of the needs met in the way that they needed to. So we've always shared, for the pandemic, if you went through the pandemic, everyone was affected. No one came out of that without some challenges. But for kids who had some of that struggle buffered by supportive families or other resources or community experiences. I know for our school district we ran some daycare programs and partnered with some local organizations, folks who were able to get connected to that. We know that buffered that experience. For kids who didn't get connected to that or weren't able to access some of those supports, it really represented 18 months to a couple years, sometimes being in very challenging situations under duress. So we know that all of these risk factors post-COVID increased. We also know, and this was some an Educational Research Bureau had shared this last spring. Some of the other challenges around this bigger spike in absenteeism. One, parents see less value in in-person attendance. COVID, we were very generous with attendance, and we had to be. We had to create different pathways for kids to interact with content. We looked for kind of digital footprints of attendance where kids were either online while instruction was happening or showed some evidence that they were kind of going along with learning. That really did end up changing attitudes within families. Some of the trends are that families really believe they should have the authority to send or not send their kid to school too, which is a new trend. Second one, students aren't motivated to come to school and they have more options to skip. So following COVID, we've kept a lot of infrastructure for kids to be able to learn asynchronously, or if they're gone for a day, to be able to come in and see what the class was learning and be able to find out what homework they had. And certainly we have cases of students who have been chronically absent from school and also keeping up with their studies, because that's they're able to manage that. Our big concern are the kids who've stepped away from school, aren't engaging in any sort of way, and we've lost months to, in some cases, years of learning. The final cause is teachers remaining unsure and underutilized in combating absenteeism, and that was one of our big ahas from last spring, kind of going into planning this summer. Is some of the research is if a student is missing school, they'll respond a lot better to hearing from their classroom teacher than from a school counselor or principal or me or an automated letter. Like, that personal connection is an important part of working to get kids back to school, and something that I don't think we didn't include, but thinking through the systems, how do we make it easy for teachers to interact with kids and really support that communication? One of our big challenges right now is the scale of the issue, and so I'm going to get into some data about what this actually looks like. Little caveat with the data, lots of people measure attendance in lots of different ways. Wisconsin, we see some Wisconsin data they considered, and they're even making some changes to their data sets we learned last week. They consider high-risk absenteeism 10 or more days is one way, so 10 or more days missing for really any reason. We measure it by way of chronic absenteeism, which is 10% or more, and that's really what the research supports. If a child misses 10% or more school days, they're really going to have a hard time learning everything they need to advance academically. But these are all really kind of crude measures. There's a lot of nuance within this. If a student misses, has an appointment in the morning, misses 2 hours, but comes later, we don't count that as a full day of attendance, and we don't really have a way to part this. So you're going to see some pretty rough numbers. The reason that we look at chronic absenteeism, though, is it does give us a better idea of the amount of school that is actually being missed. A lot of public school districts will sometimes just rely on their average daily attendance, which in our schools is sometimes upwards in 93 to 95%. You could really walk away from that saying, well, geez, on most days, most kids are in school. But when you really break it into who's missing and how much are they missing, it leads to some concerning trends. And I think it does connect with some other outcomes that we're monitoring and why we struggle to close some of the gaps that we have within schools. So I'll just talk on this. If you have questions like what does the data mean, we can pause, but I want to make sure everyone's kind of along for what we're looking at and what it means. So first graph here is our statewide high-risk absenteeism. So this is statewide. This is the percentage of students who miss 10 or more days of school. You can see kind of in that pre-COVID, early COVID, 22.9%. Last year, 43.6% high-risk absenteeism statewide. All of our area districts, I've got all their graphs too, I'm not sharing them here tonight, but part of our county current state update is every district reports on this. We've all seen about the same trend. A little bit different district to district, but we've seen that increase. For our district, you can see we are last year 49.1% high-risk absenteeism by the state standard. The state did dip last year. We didn't. We continued to increase. That was a surprise to us, especially considering how much work we put into some of our prevention and early intervention efforts. But we can talk about some of the adjustments. But basically, what we found was last year, despite our efforts, we had another increase, at least in this metric for state reporting. One of the shifts that we made a few years ago, and this gets to why we monitor chronic absenteeism, we used to only talk about truancy, which is, you're unexcused from school. And one of the things that we realized is in looking in that is we're missing kids who are missing lots of school, sometimes for excused reasons, sometimes for, not necessarily good reasons, but they're not necessarily truant either. At the end of the day, what we decide is whether you're excused or unexcused, you're still missing the same amount of learning. So that's how we landed on chronic absenteeism, and it's really what's advised by Attendance Works, which is a national organization that helps school districts support attendance efforts. So what we're looking at here is a breakdown of percent of students who are chronically absent from school, meaning they've missed 10% or more for any reason. And this is all based on like that full day attendance rate. So it's apples to apples. We've measured it the same way for years, so you get an idea. So in 2019-20, 17.2%. In 2020-21, 31.9%. 21-22, 33.6%. And then last year, 43.7% of our students were chronically absent. And by 10% in a school year, you're really talking about a month of school. You're talking 18, 19 days of school, which is, pretty significant. Some of those increases during COVID, and you can think about when we first came back to school. The auto log out. When we first came back to school, we actually told kids to stay home, or we quarantined them, if you remember that experience. So that did account for some of what we were seeing. But now that we've been open, now that we've, have really kind of changed the way that we get kids back into school and quarantine rules, like I said, we were expecting improvements in that simply because of that. We just didn't end up seeing that, which is disappointing. Let me get the slideshow back up. Our high school students, in fact, I'll show a slide in a little bit. Our high school students had the highest level of chronic absenteeism. So at elementary, 27.1%. Middle school students, 48% chronically absent. And then our high school students, 64.3%. Students with disabilities, half of our students with disabilities were chronically absent. So when you think about kids really need to be at school to get the help and support and services they need, that's a big challenge. And then in terms of students who identify female or male, really no difference there for that. Moving on to other groups, you can see, do all of you have this? I'm reading it because I'm seeing some people just reference the screen. Is it helpful to read it, or? Okay. So last year, our Native American students, 70% chronically absent. Our Asian students, 28.1%. Our Asian students actually early in the pandemic had a spike of absenteeism, chronic absenteeism that a number of people worked to kind of address, and that has recovered. Their attendance has recovered nicely. Our Black non-Hispanic students, 65.5% chronically absent. Hispanic students, 58.7%. Students two or more races, 58.4%. And then our white students, 40.1%. So we share this next slide really to share, like, this isn't just about illness or families calling their kids in sick, or kids staying out for good reason. This slide here really looks at students who are unexcused 20 days or more of school. So this is missing, in addition to maybe illness days or things like that. These are days that kids were no call, no show, didn't show up, were unaccounted for. By grade level, and in all, we had 545 students who missed a month of school or more unexcused, which is very, very challenging. When, like I said, when we talk about absenteeism, attendance has been an ongoing conversation. One of our principals, I'm not sure where she found it, but she sent me an article from, I think it was 2009, where the school district was talking about truancy and what to do. The scale is just so different now. I mean, when you're talking half of your kids high risk, talking 3,000 kids, in interventions for that. And so that's where our mind has been, and we're going to get into some of those strategies. But everything we're thinking about is how do we have scaled interventions that really get at the large volume of kids who aren't at school on a day-to-day basis. But driving this, good attendance at school ready to learn is protective and an essential condition of ensuring the following. That's students are safe from abuse and neglect. So if that's a concern of yours, the welfare of kids in our community, we actually believe schools a 40-hour-a-week safety plan. They're in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right things, and they're safe for any of the other community things that might be happening that put them in harm's way. If you're concerned about whether or not our kids are on track to graduate, school's the best way to do that. You got to be here to stay current in your academics, to learn everything you need to know, to be able to take the courses that you're interested in, so you're prepared for whatever's next to you in life. If you're worried about kids' mental health, being at school is where we built all of our mental health supports, and we have got wonderful partnerships with all sorts of community organizations to make sure kids get the right care at the right time. If you're worried about youth in the criminal justice system, school makes sure they're in the right place, at the right time, with the right people doing the right thing. It's the primary way to disrupt patterns where kids get into things they shouldn't be getting into. And then finally, college and career ready. We've been talking with our community partners a lot about this. Really the practices and habits of school and everything that you learn about that really do help you get in the practice of being accountable to be somewhere and doing productive things and building those work habits and being able to work through adversity and all the soft skills that businesses are looking for. So for us, this attendance challenge is top priority, and we're putting a lot of time and attention into it, and I hope what you'll see is some good effort from the district and our community partners to try and move things in the right direction. So a lot of different approaches to absenteeism, historical approaches. When we used to talk about truancy, we're mainly focused around compliance, punitive responses, sanctions, formal system responses, courts, things like that. We believe effective approaches are more built around a full continuum of service, prevention, early intervention, intensive intervention, that attendance isn't just a school issue or a court issue, that it's a community issue, that we need to rally our community around making sure kids are at school ready to learn. It involves family engagement, really helping families support their child and attending regularly. Focuses on factors that actually are resulting in absenteeism. And then the final part is how do we combine meaningful incentives with meaningful accountability. And so the approach that we've taken has largely been from Attendance Works, which is a national organization that researches school attendance issues and helps support school districts implementing attendance efforts. Our county work group has about 75 people who attend our big meetings on La Crosse County attendance efforts. And then we have 3 active work groups. One that works around prevention. How do we mitigate absenteeism from ever occurring in the first place? Early intervention team really looks at how do we identify kids early and intervene so it doesn't become a more challenging issue. And then intensive intervention team, which is to, what do we do with these kids who've missed lots of school? And by lots, I'm talking we have kids in our community who have missed years, multiple years since they've been in school. That's a big challenge. This past year, what we developed was a graduated response matrix to kind of organize our efforts. I'd say the last 2 years, the main focus has been around our prevention efforts and our prevention efforts and early intervention efforts. We've had a lot of dialogue around what does the intensive support looks like, what's the role of law enforcement, municipal code, courts, things like that. And so we really feel like this graduated response kind of lays out our efforts from prevention all the way to intensive intervention to help support kids getting to school. So prevention efforts, lots of them. You've probably seen, I've got up here one of our banners that we created. Those banners are in every La Crosse County school. They're hung up in Holman and Onalaska and West Salem and Bangor. That was a terrific partnership. This idea that it doesn't matter what school district you're in, attendance matters and we want you at school. We have a number of summer activities with our community youth supports program. They're terrific partners with the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, our system of care, putting together events for kids, making sure kids have supplies to start the year, that they know when their open houses are. Some of those folks are even bringing kids to their open houses. Lots of engagement that way. We've got 2 new MTU partnerships. One of them is called Second Chance to School. And so if transportation is the issue, which it can be for kids, if a student misses their primary transportation to school, They can get on any MTU in the city, let the driver know they're a second chance rider. We've worked out how the payment works to get them to school. But our communication with kids is if you overslept, don't lose the whole day. Come in when you can. Get on an MTU and get to school. And the drivers have been terrific about guiding kids on any sort of changes they need to make for bus routes and those sorts of things. We've also had some supported MTU rides into some neighborhoods where we saw some elevated levels of absenteeism. This was at the elementary level. We worked with MTU on routes that would be able to go into the neighborhood and drop off right at school. Had lots of volunteers for community riders. So we've got, Andy Keel from the Boys and Girls Club was on one of the buses, and the kids see him, they get on, trying to make everybody comfortable. It's created some really neat partnerships with residents in those neighborhoods who are now also looking out for kids and helping support their tenants. Through a tremendous partnership with Maury's Auto Group, Amber Erickson over at Central had developed Attendance Matters powered by Maury's partnership, which created structured incentives for our high schools to be able to incentivize regular school attendance or even improve school attendance. So even if you didn't come all of first quarter, if you start coming today, you can be acknowledged for that. And so that's been a powerful partnership. We've been working on absenteeism communications. We'll be coming out with some text capability soon. I think a lot of families might be more responsive to texts than maybe getting the auto calls and those sorts of things. And then all of our efforts that schools do around early outreach. Families who ended the year with attendance challenges, having schools reach out to them first thing before the start of the year to work through any barriers to help them get to school. Early intervention efforts involve lots of different things. Into this year, we built in teacher phone calls home because we know that teachers calling kids matters, like I shared before. We have nudge letters. Some of the research indicates that, and we made this change last year, but when we can adjust our letters to move away from more of that kind of bureaucratic language about statutes and fines and things like that, and just simply say, hey, we want to partner with you and your family, help your son or daughter get to school more frequently, it can make a difference. So our first 3 letters out to families are all nudge based, lets them know, hey, you've missed more school than other people, but we want to partner with you. Made some great connections with Good Fight Way, our Be Great graduate program that we've spoken about before. A new program that we're in now, but still getting set up, Engage Wisconsin. Wisconsin DPI is a big grant to address absenteeism because it's been such a big challenge across the state. This will, Engage Wisconsin will be a partnership where we'll get some extra assistance on outreach, helping to connect with kids, even kids that we might even lost contact with. The Graduation Alliance has manpower to help assist us with that. And then our attendance meetings, which are really bringing families in to identify kind of what's at the root of their child's attendance issues, and for teams to really figure out what we can do to get those things out of the way. One of our most, I think, intensive intervention is our community health worker, which really partners a community health worker with a family. So if the issues are transportation, they can help with that. If it's, gosh, we've got some unmet needs in the family, we can help with that. If there's appointments needed to help improve health or mental health, we can do that too. So we're really offering, everything down to, we'll give you your own personal community health worker to help your family with whatever you need, just so we can get your child to school. I'd say, I've talked with a lot of districts in the state, and the amount of infrastructure that we built around prevention, early intervention, I haven't seen in other communities, and we're lucky to have the partners that we have. Final area, kind of final frontier, is intensive intervention efforts. And what we're framing around this is, what is reasonable accountability? We had a planning meeting last year with our full committee where we really asked, like, we are going to exhaust prevention, early intervention efforts, but at what point do we need to say, we got to do something formal? We need to get involved with this family and compel a child to come to school. And one of the things we shared, like, what is your timeline? Is it if a child misses a week of school, or 2 weeks, or a month, or 6 months, or a year? Because we were in the context at the time where we have kids missing years of school, and I think a lot of it came from the good intentions of, let's be cautious about getting students and families involved in formal systems, and do we really want to criminalize youth, and can we disrupt the school to prison pipeline? Our worry is long-term, if kids don't have an education, their risk for getting exposed to that same pipeline is really there. And it's, how long do you wait, before you get involved? So that's some of what this work is. Some of what we framed in here is we have system of care as a pathway with Bridget Todd. I know she's come and spoke. Chronic absenteeism is one of our focus acts that she can get involved with. We are working with community partners on a habitual truancy process, including with our police department. We are kind of the only school district in our county who does not use their municipal system to ticket for truancy. Every other school district does. For a lot of reasons, ours hasn't. We have asked our community partners, and this really came out of our county work, to consider using a truancy ticket to be able to have a student and a family go to municipal court. We've spoken with the municipal judge who said, listen, this is a time for me to be able to sit down side by side with the student and the family to make a plan for attendance. We think it's limited. We don't think that we're going to, ticket our way out of this issue. But again, we are looking at scaled intervention. So if half of the kids who miss 20 or more days say, you know what, now that there's tickets on the table, I'm just going to go to school, it's easier to do it that way, that takes a big chunk of kids, off our list of folks to intervene with. Also in Wisconsin, we are going to be resuming making youth justice referrals. There's actually some statute language about referrals for juveniles in need of protective service. And one of the reasons for that can be kids who are chronically absent from school, habitually truant. And so we'll be making those referrals. It's hard to say how our system partners will handle those, but we'll be making those for our elementary age students once they've missed 15, so no call, no show for 15 days in any one semester. We will be making those. And then for our secondary students, it'll follow that. There'll be a little bit more flexibility on timing of making that referral. But we are going to be asking our system partners to get formally involved to disrupt what we're seeing in our community. Final couple options. Our district attorney has been open. So in Wisconsin, this was a few years ago, state statute changed. So the Child Welfare Code doesn't recognize educational neglect, but our criminal code does. And so our district attorney has been open to this idea of a educational neglect pre-referral to meet with families before there's any charges or anything, but where we have catastrophic attendance and kids are not at school, and the parents' primary reason for why that child's not being made available for school, they're willing to do that. And then we've updated some of our processes around child welfare referrals to make sure staff know to report that when they suspect. One of the things that we have found after building kind of this whole system is a lot of times the kids and families who aren't engaging with all the available supports, there are oftentimes something else going on. the families where I'd love to get my kid to school, but gosh, I've got 3 jobs, or I can't transport, or I need someone to watch my child and, the sibling in the morning. We've actually been able to work through all those challenges, and we can move kids around lots of creative ways around town. We can get them food, we can get them sports, we can get them appointments, we can pay for the appointments. We've got a lot of resource that way. Really where we've struggled is when there are other things happening within that home where they're at this point really not receptive to help, and there's young children involved. And so we do think the risk of having a whole generation of kids kind of bow out of education, and in the spirit of and us not responding in this sort of way, kind of in the spirit of keeping them out of formal systems, we do believe the risk is high for these 545 kids. The risk is high with no intervention. They're probably going to be on a unhealthy track for themselves and our community. So I want to pause there. That was just a long stretch of me talking. So want to pause there, and I'll take any kind of reactions. This fits, doesn't fit, liked what you said here, didn't care for that too much, or any questions you might have about some of our efforts.
You know what? Okay.
I'm curious if you know the history. When did we shift to this more comprehensive, assessment and intervention approach from the historical punitive and compliance model?
Yeah, we're probably, I'd have to look. I think we're 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
We had really shifted to the attendance works model.
And then pre-COVID, did it work? Did we see a significant dent in? Well, I mean, I know we moved from looking just at truancy as well, but
Yeah.
do we have data before COVID that shows us the effectiveness of these practices?
Yeah, hard to say on that, because some of the implementation, some of these have been developed even through COVID.
Right.
So you can kind of think of it as we had a menu. I mean, basically the menu we had when we first started was system of care.
Right.
And that was one of our focus acts that we had included. So we've met every year since that first year to develop this, we've added more supports as there's been more research. So I think it'd be hard to measure.
Yeah.
I remember at the time we felt like, this is in terms of the prevention, early intervention, people bought into that right away. And there's good evidence around that. And that was something that was lacking. We really didn't have a cohesive county strategy to talk with our community about attendance or, really what to do about it early on, yeah.
What are some of the incentives we have set up at the high school level? I'm guessing pizza parties aren't doing it anymore.
Yeah, no, the way that got structured, so we wanted to include recognizing kids for good and improved attendance. And so there's a couple different types of incentive designs within that. They're doing weekly drawings for kids who are at, I think it's 90% or better attendance. So even if you haven't had good attendance, I forget what the window is. It might be like a 2-week window or a 1-month window. But if you turn it around, you can be eligible for that. And then
what are the drawings for, though? I mean, with Maury's involved, is it a car?
No. That was one of the thoughts on it.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is like gift cards and school store things and school swag. But then there's quarterly celebrations where we put together packages. So there's I think because the first month of school is so critical, drawing within the first month, but it includes packages like night at the game, so you can get a dinner out for 5 or 6 friends, tickets to the game or to movies. So if you want to go to a football game or if you want to go to movies, you can do that. Some of them included rides. I think there was a homecoming package, there's a prom package, there's a summer fun package for the end of the year, which included gift cards and whatnot. But Maurice had donated $9,000 last year
Wow.
to that, and then another $9,000 this year.
You got more?
A little bit. I know we're getting late, but
Yeah.
I'm curious about home visits. Are they yielding us valuable information here? Like not just what the families are telling us, but what we're seeing there, and is that informing what we're developing as far as new practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pick up a lot. I mean, if the family answers the door and will communicate with the school staff, the social worker, the counselor who's gone out, or the teacher, the principal, that does yield valuable information on, what the barriers are. And again, those home visits aren't like, you're breaking law and we're here to gather your child. It really is problem solving. We've seen more and more where people aren't engaging with us. They're not answering the door. As on a home visit last year where there was a note left up for us that basically said, please stop coming around. We're not going to answer. Don't knock on the door anymore.
Wow.
And so in those sorts of cases, it becomes a bit more challenging.
Yeah.
Dr. Sprague, in 3 minutes, do you have anything else?
No, I'll be
Do
done.
any other board members have questions or comments?
I think the only comment I would have is I do see a lot of external motivators. I think intrinsic motivators obviously are what we're striving for, but I just don't know how we get there. So that's what's rattling around in my head is, we do have a lot of extrinsic motivators here, and how do we move from the extrinsic to the intrinsic?
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure that is, if you could figure that out, then you'd be making a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? And be able to sell that to other
Yeah.
school districts. But yeah, that's what's going on in my head currently.
Yeah, we've even shared, like, relationships are powerful, and those connections actually make a big difference. But kids have to be at school to even develop those. There is ways to pair positive behavior with positive emotion. Is actually what creates intrinsic motivation. But again, you need those a series of those interactions to really develop that in young people, or adults even.
Yeah, over time.
Yep, yep. Time.
It seems like the biggest, I've been thinking about it too, but the biggest draw would be for students to be enough of part of their peer communities that they want to be at school.
Yeah.
And I know that I worked at schools with high attendance issues in the South. And I didn't call home when they weren't there. I stopped class and they called each other.
Sure.
So I was like, let's take 5 minutes. He's not here. And who's
Yeah.
got so-and-so's phone number? And there's something about hearing from their peers.
Yeah.
I don't know. We heard from Central students that they were worried there weren't as many club opportunities or like downtime during the school day.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's always a struggle with instructional time and what to do with it, but building
Yeah.
community, that peer community is, I think, even more,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You're doing a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not easy work, so
Correct.
I appreciate that you're out there knocking on doors and connecting people with resources.
Yeah, and I know there's folks in the district that are exploring, should we be offering school at different times of day or in a different way that kids might engage with? All that takes some infrastructure. Those conversations are happening. There's nothing for sure there, but
It's a lot.
yeah.
It's early start times. All right, we've got 1 minute. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for waiting on us, too.
Absolutely.
Over and over again.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And he says, go. Cameras, and things too.